The
Hold
fluorescent
still, I'm
lights of
checking
the
the swelling.
hospital waiting room
It really
buzzed overhead
hurts.
as
Okay,
Marcus
try to
Henderson
stand.
sat
Lean
with
on me.
his head
I
in his
can't.
hands, his perfectly pressed interview suit now wrinkled and stained with someone else's blood. His phone had been ringing non-stop for the past hour, first his babysitter, then his best friend, and finally a number he recognized as Klein and Associates, the marketing firm where he was supposed to be sitting for the most important interview of his life. Instead, he was here, watching doctors rush past while a stranger's life hung in the balance, all because he'd made a split-second decision that might have just cost him everything. Marcus had been a single father for 3 years now, ever since his wife Sarah passed away from cancer. Their daughter, 6-year-old Emma, was his entire world. Every decision he made, every sacrifice, every late night studying for his marketing certification, it was all for her. To give her the life Sarah would have wanted. To be the father they both deserved. That morning had started like any other. Emma had insisted on picking out his tie, choosing the blue one with tiny elephants that Sarah had given him years ago. "For good luck, Daddy," she'd said, adjusting it with her small hands. The Klein and Associates interview was at 10 o'clock sharp, and Marcus had left 2 hours early, knowing that missing this opportunity wasn't an option. They needed this. The freelance work was drying up, rent was due in 2 weeks, and Emma's school supplies weren't going to buy themselves. He was making good time, rehearsing his answers to potential interview questions as he drove, when traffic suddenly ground to a halt on the interstate. Not the usual slow crawl, a complete standstill. As minutes ticked by with no movement, Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. He couldn't be late. Not today. Then he saw her. A woman had climbed out of a silver sedan about 50 feet ahead, stumbling toward the median. Even from a distance, Marcus could see something was wrong. She was clutching her chest, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Other drivers honked impatiently, but no one moved to help. She collapsed onto the grass barrier, and that's when Marcus made his choice. He threw his car into park, hazards on, and ran. Ma'am, can you hear me?" Marcus knelt beside her, his marketing portfolio forgotten on the passenger seat of his car. The woman was probably in her 50s, well-dressed in a business suit, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Her face was ashen, her breathing shallow and rapid. "My chest," she gasped. "Can't breathe." Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. Heart attack. It had to be. He'd watched enough medical shows with Emma to recognize the signs. The operator's voice was calm, asking questions, giving instructions. "Is she responsive? Can she speak?" "Barely," Marcus said, loosening the woman's collar. "She's saying her chest hurts. She can't breathe properly." Other motorists had finally started to notice, a few people gathering around, but no one seemed to know what to do. The operator instructed Marcus to help her lie flat, to keep her calm, to monitor her breathing. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, each second an eternity, while somehow 20 minutes vanished in what felt like moments. The ambulance arrived, its siren piercing the morning air. Paramedics took over, asking Marcus rapid-fire questions about what he'd witnessed, when she collapsed, her symptoms. He answered everything, his own heart pounding, barely noticing that it was now 9:47 a.m. The interview was in 13 minutes, and he was still on the interstate. "Are you family?" one of the paramedics asked as they loaded the woman onto a stretcher. "No, I saw her collapse." "You probably saved her life." Classic signs of a heart attack. Minutes matter with these things. The paramedic gave him a respectful nod. "You did good." But Marcus barely heard him. He was watching the ambulance doors close, wondering if the woman would be okay, and simultaneously calculating that there was no possible way he could make it to Klein and Associates now. Even if traffic cleared instantly, he'd be at least 40 minutes late. He called the firm from his car, hands still trembling. The receptionist was polite but firm. "Mr. Henderson, we had you scheduled for 10 o'clock. We have other candidates waiting." "I'm afraid." "I know, I understand. There was an emergency on the highway. A woman had a heart attack, and I'll make a note in your file. Thank you for calling." Click. Marcus sat in his car as traffic finally began to move, feeling the weight of failure settle over him like a blanket. He'd given up the opportunity of a lifetime for a stranger. Emma's face flashed through his mind, her hopeful smile this morning, the way she'd kissed his cheek and whispered, "You're gonna do great, Daddy." What had he done? But he couldn't shake the image of the woman's pale face, her desperate gasps for air. Could he have really driven past? Left her there? His conscience wouldn't let him believe it. Something made him follow the ambulance to the hospital. Maybe he needed to know she was okay. Maybe he needed this one thing to work out today. He gave his information at the desk, explaining he was the one who'd called 911, and found himself in the waiting room, the minutes stretching into hours. It was nearly noon when a doctor approached him. "Are you Marcus Henderson?" He stood quickly. "Yes." "Is she?" "She's stable. You got to her just in time. Another 10 minutes, and we'd be having a very different conversation." The doctor smiled. "She's been asking for you. Would you like to see her?" The woman was sitting up in bed, an oxygen cannula in her nose, monitors beeping steadily beside her. But her eyes were alert, and when she saw Marcus, they filled with tears. "You," she said simply. "I'm glad you're okay," Marcus said, feeling awkward in his rumpled suit. "They told me what you did. That you stayed with me, called for help, kept me calm." She reached out a hand, and Marcus took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "What's your name?" "Marcus Henderson, ma'am." "Marcus." She studied his face intently. "You're wearing a suit. Were you on your way somewhere important?" He hesitated, then decided on honesty. "A job interview. At Klein & Associates. It was supposed to start at 10. Her expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across her features. "And you stopped anyway. I couldn't just leave you there." "Most people did," she said quietly. "I remember seeing cars drive past. Hearing horns. I thought." She trailed off, squeezing his hand. "I'm Margaret Klein." The name took a moment to register. Then Marcus's eyes widened. "Klein. As in, Klein & Associates." "Yes." She smiled at his expression. "I was on my way to the office when it happened. We were interviewing for our new senior marketing director position today. Very important role. I wanted to be there personally to meet the candidates." Marcus couldn't speak. The woman he'd saved was the CEO of the company he was supposed to interview with. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. "I'm so sorry," he managed. "I didn't know, obviously I didn't know, but—" "Marcus," Margaret interrupted gently. "How many candidates do you think we're interviewing today?" I don't know. 7. We've been searching for 3 months. Do you know what I've seen in those 3 months? Hundreds of resumes. Dozens of impressive portfolios. People who can talk about market analytics and brand positioning and consumer behavior." She paused, adjusting her oxygen tube. "Do you know what I haven't seen? Character. Real character. The kind of person who gives up something they desperately need to help a stranger." "Mrs. Klein, I looked at your resume while they were running my EKG," she continued. "Single father. Freelancing while raising your daughter. Putting yourself through certification programs. And today you proved something no resume could ever show me. You proved you understand what really matters." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I can't give you the senior director position," Margaret said, and Marcus's heart sank. "That requires more experience than you currently have. But we have an associate director role that just opened up last week. Smaller team, but room to grow. More importantly, flexible hours for a single dad." She smiled. "How would you feel about starting Monday?" The words didn't compute at first. What? "I'm offering you a job, Marcus. If you want it." He thought of Emma, waiting at home to hear how the interview went. He thought of the rent that was due, the groceries he'd been stretching, the constant juggling of bills and responsibilities. He thought of Sarah, and somehow knew she would have stopped too. "I want it," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Margaret squeezed his hand again. "Thank you, Marcus, for reminding me that there are still good people in this world. And for saving my life." 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in his new office at Klein & Associates, a framed photo of Emma on his desk. Margaret had been released from the hospital after 3 days and was already back at work, much to her doctor's frustration. She'd stopped by his office that morning, looking healthier and stronger. "How's it going?" she asked. "Good. Great, actually." Marcus gestured to the marketing proposal on his screen. "The team's been wonderful. I'm glad." She paused in the doorway. "You know, Marcus, I've built this company over 30 years. I've made a lot of smart business decisions. But the best decision I ever made was choosing to drive to work that morning instead of having my assistant bring the files. Because it led me to you. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of working things out. After she left, Marcus looked at Emma's photo, her gap-toothed smile, her eyes that looked so much like Sarah's. He touched the elephant tie she'd chosen for him, still hanging in his office as a reminder. He'd gone to an interview that day and missed it completely. But he'd found something better, proof that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything you think you need, has a way of coming back around. Not always. Not guaranteed. But sometimes, when you're least expecting it, kindness finds a way to repay itself. And in a world that often felt too rushed, too disconnected, too willing to drive past someone in need, that was a truth worth holding on to.